Sure. Here is section 1 of your story script, written in a tight, emotionally rich, and to the point style with a minimum of 500 words. It avoids filler and sets the stage for the infidelity arc. It started like any other Thursday. I was halfway through chopping vegetables when I glanced at the time, 7:48. He was late again. No call. No text. I used to worry. Now, I don't even flinch. His job always came first. I understood that, or at least I convinced myself I did. The silence in the house had become normal, almost comforting in a strange way. I turned off the stove and poured myself a glass of wine. Not to celebrate anything, just habit. Routine. The doorbell rang. I paused, unsure. We rarely had visitors, especially unannounced. I peeked through the window. 3 familiar faces stood there, older but unmistakable. Friends of my husband from college, David, Eric, and Sean. I hadn't seen them in years. I opened the door. They smiled like they were exactly where they belonged. David stepped forward first, his voice warm. We were passing through town. Thought we'd drop in, catch up. He home. I hesitated.
No.
Working late again. That sentence carried more weight than I intended. They noticed. David exchanged a look with Eric, then turned back to me. Mind if we come in for a bit?
I should have said no. I know that now.
But something in me, boredom, loneliness, I don't know, made me step aside.
Sure.
Why not? They brought the noise with them, the energy I hadn't felt in this house in so long. Laughter echoed through the kitchen. They remembered everything. Our wedding, their college stunts, even my old nickname. I laughed too, almost forgetting how it felt to enjoy company. The wine disappeared faster than I expected. Their voices filled up the dead corners of the house that had gotten used to silence. I caught myself watching David. He had the same smile, but something was different.
Softer.
He looked at me like he remembered things I didn't even know I had shared. He asked questions.
Real ones. Not the kind meant to fill time.
He listened. Not with distracted nods like my husband, but with stillness. With presence. Eric talked about his divorce. Sean joked about his failed startup, and David just watched me with those eyes that didn't judge. Only noticed. I poured another glass. My hand trembled slightly, and I wasn't even cold. The clock ticked past 10. Still no message from my husband. David said, "He really works this late often?" I nodded. Every weeknight. Sometimes weekends. He didn't reply. Just gave this slight frown that felt like sympathy, but not pity. I hated how comforting it felt. I shouldn't have needed it. I caught my reflection in the oven door when I stood up, wine in hand, smiling at someone who wasn't my husband. My heart didn't race, but it wasn't still either. By the time they were getting ready to leave, it was drizzling outside. David lingered at the door, thanking me softly. Our eyes held for half a second longer than they should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just polite nostalgia. Just old friends. But something had shifted. Something I couldn't name. And I had let it in. Of course. Here's section 2 of your infidelity short story script, written with the same tight, direct narrative style and at least 500 words, with no repetition from section 1. The rain got heavier after they arrived, so they stayed longer. None of us mentioned it, but we knew. I offered them dinner. They accepted, without hesitation. It felt too easy. The kitchen, once filled with silence, now buzzed with warmth and voices I didn't realize I missed. David stayed close. He offered to help and I didn't say no. He chopped vegetables beside me, too close for it to be casual. His arm brushed mine once. I didn't move. I asked how life had been. He talked about travel, work, things he was proud of. I listened more than I spoke. It felt strange being seen again. Not as someone's wife.
Just as me.
While Eric and Sean joked in the living room, David asked, "Are you happy?" It wasn't casual. Not harmless. I blinked, unsure how to answer. He didn't fill the silence. Just waited. I lied. Of course. It came out flat. He didn't push. Just nodded like he knew better. I felt exposed. Dinner passed with easy conversation. Nothing obvious. No one else noticed. But I did. Every look, every pause. I noticed it all. Later, after dishes were cleared, I poured another glass of wine. David took his black, no ice, like he used to. He remembered mine too. Small details, but they felt deliberate. Like they meant something. We sat around the fireplace. Music played low in the background. Something slow, nostalgic. Sean talked about his new girlfriend, half serious, half mocking. Eric laughed about being single again. The talk turned toward relationships. Old and new. David stayed quiet, then asked a question that cut straight through the laughter. What do you think makes people stop trying? No one answered at first. They all thought he meant in general. I knew he didn't. I responded without looking at him. Maybe they don't realize they've stopped until it's too late. His eyes found mine again. I held the stare for a second longer than necessary. They all laughed it off, but something tightened in my chest. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. I had promised myself that long ago. But here it was, ache, attention, the feeling of being wanted. All of it rushed back. As the night went on, I forgot what time it was. I forgot how long it had been since someone asked me how I felt instead of what I needed to do. David didn't say much after that. He didn't have to. The quiet between us was louder than the rest of the room. He caught my eye one last time before standing. I'll grab some blankets. We'll sleep downstairs, don't worry. I nodded, unsure why my throat felt tight. I sat alone after they went to set up their beds. The wine glass felt warm in my hand. My pulse was louder than the rain against the windows. I had done nothing wrong. Not yet. But I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it would be. How easy he made it feel. Absolutely. Here's section 3 of your story script, continuing with the same direct, focused style, minimum 500 words, no repetition or filler. The house had gone quiet. I couldn't sleep. The wine had worn off, but something else kept me restless. I moved through the dark with careful steps, unsure why I even left the bedroom. Maybe I knew exactly why. He was already there. David. Awake. Still dressed. He turned when he heard me. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was waiting. I sat across from him. No excuses, no explanation. Just space we didn't try to fill. He looked at me for a while before he finally spoke. I used to wonder what it would have been like if things had gone differently. He didn't smile. It wasn't a joke. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. It had been sitting between us all night, getting heavier. I'm not sure what you think this is, I said, barely above a whisper. Does it matter? He replied. You're not happy. You haven't been for a long time. I should have argued. Should have defended my life, my marriage. But I didn't. Because he was right. Saying it out loud would have made it real. I think about you more than I should, he added.
Calm. Certain.
Like he'd been holding it in too long. I didn't move. I didn't look away. It's not fair, I said. None of this is fair, he replied. But it's honest. Honesty. That word hit hard. Because I hadn't been honest with myself in years. I had told myself everything was fine. That distance was normal. That silence wasn't a sign. That wanting more was selfish. He stood slowly, walked closer. Still no rush. No pressure. Just waiting for me to say no. I didn't. His hand reached for mine, and this time, I let it stay there. My fingers curled around his without thinking. The warmth of it made my chest ache. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly. But I'm here. I should have said something. But words felt useless. I just stood there, staring at him like he was something I'd forgotten I needed. The kiss happened without warning. Soft, hesitant, like we were testing a truth we both already knew. I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Like relief. Like exhale. Every part of me leaned into him, not just my body, but the part of me that had been starving in plain sight. When it ended, we didn't speak. We just stood there. Closer than we should have been. Closer than I'd been to anyone in a long time. I left before anything else happened. I had to. I walked back to the bedroom on legs that didn't feel like mine. I climbed into a bed that suddenly felt foreign. I stared at the ceiling until morning, my body still humming with something I couldn't define. I had crossed a line. Not because of what we did, but because of what I let myself feel. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Of course. Here's section 4 of your story script, maintaining the same focused, emotionally direct style with a minimum of 500 words, closing the arc without repetition or filler. The morning light felt sharp. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt it. I moved through the house like I was borrowing someone else's life. The coffee didn't taste right. My reflection didn't look wrong, but I didn't recognize her either. They were already awake, packing up, talking quietly. I avoided looking at David. I couldn't afford to read anything in his face.
Not now.
Not with everything still so fresh on my skin, in my chest. My husband walked in 20 minutes later, carrying the usual excuses in his voice. Delayed meeting. Overnight file issue. He kissed my cheek out of habit. I nodded and offered him coffee like I hadn't betrayed him in silence 12 hours earlier. David barely looked at me when they said goodbye. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't. It felt like something left open, unfinished, dangerous. After they left, I stood at the window longer than I should have. My husband asked about their visit. I gave a brief answer, kept my voice steady. He didn't ask more. That said everything. The rest of the day passed with fake smiles and half-hearted conversation. He talked about the new client. I nodded in all the right places. My mind stayed somewhere else. Every laugh felt off. Every word felt distant. Like I was watching my life from the outside, playing a part one used to know by heart. I noticed how he didn't look at me when I spoke. How he reached for his phone halfway through my sentence. Things I'd seen before, but now I couldn't unsee them. They weren't small. They were patterns. And I had let them become normal. Later that night, he fell asleep beside me without a word. I stared at the ceiling, same as the night before. Only this time the silence was heavier. Because now I knew the difference between being touched and being felt. Between being tolerated and being seen. The guilt didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, in the quiet moments. Folding laundry, washing dishes, passing mirrors. It showed up in my own hesitation, reaching for his hand and pulling back without meaning to, smiling and feeling it crack halfway through. I told myself it was just a kiss.
Just a moment.
But it wasn't. It was everything I had been avoiding. A mirror I hadn't looked into in years. I didn't tell anyone. There was nothing to confess that wouldn't destroy everything, and nothing to keep that wouldn't haunt me. So, I lived with it. Carried it like a secret stitched into the lining of my clothes. Days passed. Then weeks. On the surface, nothing changed. But inside, everything had shifted. I wasn't the same woman. I couldn't go back to not knowing how it felt to be chosen in a room full of noise. I didn't regret the kiss. I regretted needing it. And now, no matter how tightly I shut the door, the part of me that opened will never fully close.